On the morning of February 19th, 2013, a fleet of tactical vehicles surrounded a quiet, suburban home in Perth, Australia. Heavily armed officers smashed through the front door, guns drawn, screaming commands. They moved with the precision of a counter-terrorism unit hunting a high-value target. But they weren't looking for a drug lord. They weren't looking for a murderer. They were looking for a 17-year-old boy named Dylan Wheeler. And when they dragged them out of his bedroom in his pajamas, they didn't just find stolen credit cards or pirated movies. On his hard drive, hidden among terabytes of video game code, was something that terrified the United States government. Software that wasn't meant to be seen by civilian eyes. This teenager, along with a small group of friends, had accidentally pulled off one of the most sophisticated corporate breaches in history. They had broken into Microsoft. They had stolen the unreleased Xbox One. But in their greed, they stumbled into a server they should never have touched. They had downloaded the flight control software for the US Army's deadliest weapon, the Apache attack helicopter. That morning, a group of bored gamers turned themselves into an international national security threat. To understand how a group of teenagers ended up on the FBI's most wanted list, we have to go back to the beginning, before the raids and before the felonies. Just like the bank robbers in North Hollywood started with small scams, the Xbox Underground didn't start as a criminal enterprise. It started as a hobby. Dylan Wheeler was a bright but bored kid living in Australia. He wasn't interested in playing the games the way they were intended. He was interested in how they worked. He was part of the modding community. Gamers who would rewrite code to create custom lobbies in Call of Duty or unlock special armor in Halo. In the digital chat rooms of the early 2010s, he met others just like him. Nathan LaRue from the United States, Sanat from Canada. They were young, incredibly smart, and completely unsupervised. But writing code wasn't enough. They realized that the real way to get access to unreleased games wasn't by hacking computers, it was by hacking people. They discovered that if they simply called Microsoft customer support and pretended to be developers who locked themselves out of their accounts, the employees would often just let them in. It was almost too easy. By 2012, this group of friends had virtually unrestricted access to Microsoft's internal developer network. They were reading private emails from executives. They were playing Gears of War 3 months before it was released. And they were making money. They sold access to these servers to other gamers for thousands of dollars. But for Dylan and Nathan, money wasn't the goal. The goal was the Holy Grail. Rumors were circulating about Microsoft's next-generation console, the Xbox One, codenamed Durango. No one outside the company had seen it, but the Xbox Underground didn't just want to see it, they wanted to steal it. And this is where they made the jump from online trolls to federal felons. They realized that hacking the network wasn't enough. They needed the physical hardware, and to get it, they would have to do something insane. They were going to walk right through the front door of Microsoft headquarters. The plan was audacious, but terrifyingly simple. Dylan, being in Australia, couldn't do the physical work, so he coordinated with 2 members in the United States, including Nathan LaRue. They didn't bring guns, they brought a cloned RFID keycard. Using data stolen from their earlier digital hacks, they had programmed a blank keycard to mimic a high-level Microsoft employee's badge. If the code was right, the doors would open. If it was wrong, security would be alerted instantly. Nathan walked up to the secure entrance of the Microsoft campus in Redmond. He swiped the card. The light turned green. Just like the bank robbers in North Hollywood entering the vault, they were in. But unlike the robbers, they didn't scream, they just walked. They made their way to the testing lab, and there they were. Several prototype Xbox One consoles sitting on desks months before the public even knew what they looked like. Nathan grabbed them, shoved them into a backpack, and walked right back out the front door. They had pulled off the perfect heist. They sold one of the prototypes on the black market for $20,000. They were untouchable. The adrenaline was high and their egos were even higher. But confidence leads to mistakes. They wanted more. They started scanning the networks of companies partnered with Microsoft. They found a breach in a company called Zombie Studios, a game developer working on a spec ops shooter game. Dylan and the crew tunneled into the Zombie Studios server, looking for game codes or map packs they could leak. They found a directory that looked out of place. It wasn't labeled Call of Duty or Gears of War. It was labeled AH-64D Apache Simulator. Thinking it was just another unreleased flight game, they began to download. But as the files hit their hard drives, they realized this wasn't a game. The software was highly realistic flight training code commissioned by the US Army for training pilots. It contained detailed physics, cockpit layouts, and weapon system dynamics for the military's primary attack helicopter. In the eyes of the law, they had just crossed a line that you can't uncross. Stealing an Xbox is corporate theft. Stealing military flight software is espionage. The download triggered an alarm, but not at Microsoft Security. This time, the alert flashed on screens at the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security. The gamer phase was over. The manhunt had begun. The FBI didn't rush. Just like a SWAT team setting up a perimeter, they took their time to build a perfect trap. They tracked the IP addresses, they intercepted the Skype calls, they watched the Xbox Underground brag about their loot in private chat rooms. The teenagers had no idea they were being watched by federal agents. They continued to hack, completely unaware that every keystroke was being recorded for evidence. Then, the hammer dropped. In a coordinated international strike, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Australian police executed raids simultaneously across the globe. Back in Perth, police stormed Dylan Wheeler's home. They seized his computers, his hard drives, even his Xbox. In the US, Nathan LaRue and others were pulled from their beds in handcuffs. The indictment was unsealed. It wasn't a slap on the wrist. They were facing decades in federal prison. The US government wanted to make an example out of them. They weren't being treated as pranksters. They were being treated as cyber terrorists. But here is where the story takes a twist that separates it from a standard crime documentary. Dylan Wheeler was charged in Australia, but while out on bail, he made a desperate choice. Using a fake passport and capitalizing on a lapse in surveillance, Dylan Wheeler boarded a plane. He fled Australia and landed in Dubai, a country with no extradition treaty for these specific crimes. While his friends in the US took plea deals and went to federal prison, Dylan remained free. He became a digital ghost, taunting authorities from overseas, maintaining that he was just a curious kid, not a criminal mastermind. Just as the North Hollywood shootout forced the police to carry heavier weapons, the Xbox Underground forced Silicon Valley to rethink security. Tech giants realized that physical walls and keycards were useless if the enemy could clone them. They shifted to zero-trust security models. But the biggest change was philosophical. Companies realized they couldn't just arrest every curious teenager. Today, Microsoft and the Pentagon pay millions in bug bounties, legally paying hackers to find these holes before the bad guys do. If Dylan and Nathan had done this today, legally, they might have been millionaires. Instead, they became fugitives. Nathan LaRue served his time in federal prison. His life as a brilliant engineer was derailed by a felony record. Dylan Wheeler remains in exile, unable to return to his home country, a permanent refugee of the digital war. The Xbox Underground weren't spies, they weren't soldiers, they were just kids who loved video games too much. But in the modern world, the line between curiosity and cyber terrorism is invisible. They proved that you don't need an army to breach the Pentagon. You don't need a tank to rob Microsoft. You just need a keyboard, a little bit of audacity, and the mistake that costs you everything.